Welcome to the Practical Growth Podcast. I'm your host, E.B. Johnson, top writer on Medium.com, published author, and master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming. You've landed on the podcast that takes you on a journey into the heart of relationships and self-discovery. This is a must listen for those who are ready to overcome their toxic relationships and their toxic patterns. You can expect real talk, practical guidance, and raw and relatable guests that you'll be talking about for weeks. Let's get into it. Hello again, my lovelies. It's me, your favorite podcast host, Medium.com writer, and TikTok narcissistic abuse recovery coach. And I am back this week with an episode that is totally going to blow your mind and change the way you think about relationships, especially if you're someone who is in the market for a relationship or who is still looking for that kind of ideal partnership, that ideal romance. Just before we jump into that, though, just a quick update. The wait list is now open for my 2023 coaching programs. That is right. If you want to get coached by me in the new year, if you've kind of been watching things, following things, and you're like, I really want to get coached, but it's just not a good time. I'll start in the new year. I'll give myself a clean slate in the new year. If that sounds like you, then you need to hurry up and get on this wait list now because it is already filling up for my first round of programs. If you're recovering from narcissistic abuse, if you want to learn how to build healthier, more stable and independent relationships, this is the program for you. You'll work one-on-one with me across 8 weeks to completely redefine your values, your beliefs, and the actions that you take in your everyday life. This is not a program that is for the faint or the weak-hearted or people who are not ready to work and to show up authentically as themselves and ready for a better life. That is why spots in this program are limited, okay? I don't work with everybody. This is not for everyone, and everyone is not a good fit. So you have to apply to be a part of not only my programs, but the waiting list as well. And if you want to do that, you need to head over to therealebjohnson.com/workingwithme. All right, let's talk about it. Let's talk about these healthy relationships that everybody claims to want, that everybody claims to be working toward, these ideal romances that people want, this perfect partner. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what that actually looks like in real life, right? Because it's people spend millions and millions and millions, probably even billions. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, like the relationship coaching and educational space. And so often in these spaces, you get sold these magic formulas and these big grand promises and this idea that if you just change enough, or if you just change what you want enough, or if the other person just changes enough, you will get this big, crazy fairy tale happily ever after that's going to feel like all the dreams you've been having since you were a kid. Here's the rub with that, though, right? That's nonsense. None of that exists. Fairy tale relationship is not going to look or feel or function anything like what most of you expect, or even like what most of you have gotten used to. Because most of you who listen to this, who follow me, who watch me on TikTok, who read my articles on Medium.com, you come from similar backgrounds to mine, right? There's some dysfunction back there. There's some key skills that we weren't taught in childhood that we didn't get in the first earliest relationships in our lives, right? We come from dysfunction, a lot of us. And so we have these big grand ideas about relationships, but we don't actually know because our baselines are chaos and upset and chasing other people for validation. And that is what we end up chasing in our relationships. Most people, when they come to me, if they're not looking specifically for narcissistic abuse recovery coaching, then they come to me wanting to fix a relationship. Okay. They might be a relationship with their family, but very, very often they want to fix a relationship with an intimate partner, or they want to learn how to find the perfect intimate partner or to be the perfect intimate partner. Or they might be in a breakup, right? They might be right in the middle of a breakup and they want big answers. They want to know, how do I get this specific ideal person that I want? How do I make sure that the next person I open my heart to is Prince Charming or Princess Charming, whatever your preference is? And, I have to explain to them that that yes, they've done visualizing, they've gotten specific, and some of those things are very, very good. But what they need to understand is that fundamentally, when we come from screwed up backgrounds, perfect relationships are completely different than what we expect them to be. Because here's the thing. Actually, truly healthy relationships that have the capability to stay together for 50, 60 years, right? When you see those couples on TV who are like, yeah, we've been together for 55 years. Those relationships, they're not fiery. They're not exciting. They're not 1,000 miles a minute. They're not. Healthy relationships that actually withstand the test of time between two people who are still happy to be there don't work that way. That's exhausting. And this idea that these relationships, like, oh, my next perfect relationship, my heart is going to be speeding all the time, and there's going to be this crazy sexual chemistry all the time, and the world is just going to be magical and nothing's going to be able to stop us. That's a delusion dreamt up by people who are used to chaos and constant nervous system overload. Okay, that's not what stable love looks like. That's not what it feels like. That's not how it functions. As a matter of fact, for those of us who were raised in chaos with a mom and dad screaming at each other, or siblings and their relationships being a total mess, for those of us that's the kind of love we grew up knowing, real love is the most boring thing in the world. Yeah, that's right. And I know that sounds delusional. You're sitting here going, well, that's not true, because I know Becky and John, and they've been together for 10 years, and they go out on blinders together every single weekend, and they have so much excitement, and they travel, and they do all these things. Just hang on a second before you hang all your hopes on Becky and John, okay? And let me explain something to you. Whatever environment you're raised in as a child, and then the first kind of relationships, the first kind of romantic relationships you get established in as a young adult, they create baselines. And these baselines are like what our body and our mind comes to see as what the norm should be, okay? So on one level, you have the experience of all these like toxic, abusive, dysfunctional relationships around you, right? Even the dysfunctional relationship that you have between yourself and your parents, if that is very messed up, if there's a neglect, if there's an abuse, if there's physical harm, all of these things affect your baseline, okay? So experientially, you come to think, oh, this is what love looks like. Like, I'm looking at this relationship between my mom and my dad. It's toxic. It's dysfunctional. That must be what it looks like. Then there's another level to these baselines, okay? You have to now think about your nervous system, okay? Because we know about nervous systems and we know about trauma, especially if you've been following me on medium.com or TikTok for a long time. We've talked about these things, Your nervous system also gets used to that dysfunction. So as a kid, if you grow up in an environment where there's just constant screaming and yelling, and you are constantly having to hide or perform to make yourself safe, and you're just basically like this little bunny rabbit with your heart just thump, 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 thump all the time, that also becomes a baseline that your body, your actual nervous system gets used to. And as you grow up, even subconsciously, your mind and your body will go, this is normal. This is what I'm used to. And it will seek it out. You will pick relationships that continue to manifest that chaos and that dysfunction. So that's why you keep picking partners, maybe that aren't like your parents, but partners who end up creating that same environment, right? The same amount of conflict, uncertainty. They don't show up for you. You constantly feel inferior, whatever it is. Your body and your mind create these baselines, even if you have to sabotage and create it with your own actions, not even just the people you bring into your life. And that happens throughout our relationships. So even if you're reading all the books and you're going to the workshops and all of those things, if you are not consciously working with your nervous system and also applying that and the concept of trauma and how all of these baselines are formed to the relationships that you're building, you're going to keep making those trauma bonds. You're going to keep making those trauma bonds and falling into these one-sided relationships where you're constantly chasing the other person, begging for support, uncertain if they really love you, they cheat on you, you don't know if they're going to be there in the morning, whatever it is, you will keep building those relationships. That's how the pattern happens. So if you're still stuck in that pattern of these toxic relationships, this dysfunction, you start to create these kind of delusional ideas of what a healthy relationship is. And they end up being surface level. You go, well, I'm looking at this person who does this thing, and this thing, but I don't want the next person to do that. I want them to do A, B, and C instead. And that's good and that's great. But then you also have to address your trauma. Okay, these baselines that you have, how your nervous system has been affected. You have to do all of this healing to make sure that your subconscious doesn't try to sabotage or create some kind of dysfunction so that it can get itself back into that chaotic environment where it's unstable and it's uncertain, which has become what it's familiar with. And so this is why, okay, it all comes back to this point. All of this, these patterns, these cycles is why that ideal relationship you're searching for, that ideal relationship that you've been journaling about, I want this perfect person who talks to me like this, who does that. That's all good and well, but you need to understand that it's going to be boring as heck, because fundamentally, a healthy relationship will lack all of the chaos and all of that dysfunction that you've been taught to see and feel as your normal, your baseline, the natural environment in which you need to exist in. Okay? This is why these healthy relationships are boring. Let's go into it deeper. Let me break it down for you, okay? Let's just break it all down. A truly healthy relationship feels boring for several different reasons. Number one, it lacks in conflict. It lacks in conflict. If you grew up in an environment which was constantly in conflict, and this doesn't even have to be actual fighting, okay? I think when people hear conflict, they take it too literal and they say, well, conflict, that means fighting. An environment that's full of conflict doesn't have to be literal verbal fighting, okay? There could be financial conflict that goes on, a lot of financial stress, which creates strain, which creates chaos and tension, passive-aggressive behaviors in an environment. And if you come from a dysfunctional childhood, that's literally probably one of the first things you remember, right? Is conflict. You probably do remember a lot of screaming, a lot of fighting, but you remember the tension. You remember people being resentful. You remember people not communicating in healthy ways. You know, if you've been here for a while, then you know my story. You know that everyone in my home was fighting all the time, just all the time, all the time. There was this pastime we used to have every now and then on a Sunday. We would drive 2 hours up to this like train museum place to have breakfast, like this all you can eat breakfast buffet and train museum thing. And while it was exciting because we were so happy to get out of the house where everyone was miserable, it was also really, really stressful for myself and another member of the family who always used to kind of like go out to the car early and be like, right, well, are you ready for the fighting? Ha ha ha. Yeah. Are you ready for the fighting? And then it was just kind of tension, shoving yourself in the corner and just bracing yourself for what you knew was going to be conflict. Anytime we had to spend more than an hour together, it was going to be a fight. And that's what a lot of us experienced growing up. And what that did is it pushed us into relationships with similar dynamics. We grow up into adults who think conflict is a natural part of a relationship, that fights like that just happen, that you and your partner should just have these horrible, petty screaming matches, or that everything should be tense, and that like resentment and not speaking to each other should just be a natural part of things. But it's not. In a healthy relationship, there is a distinct lack of like serious conflict like that. That's not to say there won't be disagreements. Every healthy relationship should have disagreements. But there shouldn't be screaming. There shouldn't be personal attacks. There shouldn't be low blows. There shouldn't be physical blows. Ever. Ever. Instead, what you should find is two partners who go out of their way to address issues civilly, like adults with maturity. And for a lot of people, when that element is gone, the conflict element, there's no fight. That is the boring trigger to them, right? They go, oh my God, do we ever disagree on anything? Well, yeah, but not really. Wow, this is so boring. This is so boring. Because people, when you're raised in that dysfunction and you're used to it, conflict seems a lot easier to manage than someone who's willing to sit across the table and speak to you face to face as an honest, open, and emotionally mature adult. And that communication is another reason why healthy relationships feel boring or uncomfortable to a lot of people. If you're not used to healthy communication, if you're not used to partners talking about what's wrong with them, apologizing, explaining themselves, being upfront, just being authentic in the way they present themselves, having emotional integrity, it feels strange. It feels weird. It can feel boring because you feel like you're talking all the time. But that's what it should be. Partners who really love one another and themselves should be able to open up. They should be able to be vulnerable. They should be able to express themselves. It doesn't matter if it's good or if it's bad. Like, healthy partners should talk. Unhealthy partners don't talk. They fight, or they stonewall, or they bury it down until everything bubbles over and the resentment is so great that they can't tolerate each other. Okay? In good relationships, there's a natural and healthy flow of communication, and that feels foreign if you've never experienced before. When your relationship is healthy, your partner will come to you. They'll speak up. They'll ask how you're feeling. They'll explain how they're feeling. And in the same vein, you'll find yourself opening up. You'll find yourself being more honest, being more authentic, not being afraid to just explain yourself, even if it's going to, be uncomfortable or not be ideal for the other person. When your partner really loves you, they'll ask you questions. They'll listen when you speak to them. They'll be present and engaged in what you say, even if it doesn't agree with their point of view. And again, if all you're used to is dysfunction, judgment, performing for validation, that feels like a totally uncomfortable, foreign, weird, boring, grown-up concept. And what a lot of us find when we move into these healthier relationships as well, and we start saying, oh, this is boring, I'm bored. What we also find to that is that it's because there's this huge natural element of trust. Because if you go back and you look at all these dysfunctional relationships behind you, all the way back into your childhood, what you'll find at the root of all of them is distrust. Okay, you couldn't trust your parents to show up and provide you with the 30% meeting of your core emotional needs as your child. You learned that they would hurt you, that they would harm you with information, that they would not be there, they would not love you, they would not give you affection or, protection if you didn't do what they wanted. That kind of distrust that you learn early on gets fed into your adult relationships. And then you build relationships with partners that you also can't fully emotionally trust because they're not emotionally honest, or they don't show up for you, or they don't make the same space for you in their lives, or they're straight up cheat on you, right? That's another aspect of that trust. But in a healthy relationship, in a good relationship, we can trust the other person, and it's inherent. We don't have to fight for it. We don't have to beg for it. There's no work. We're not like work to make sure we can trust the other person. And that can seem boring, right? But that calm is a signal that your partner is providing a safe space of some kind for you, and that you're doing the same for them. And it all whittles down to emotional integrity, right? If your partner is emotionally honest and present, they allow you to be emotionally honest and present, then you feel like you can trust them. You feel like, oh, I'm safe with this person. I'm not being judged. I'm not going to be abandoned. In a healthy relationship, there's no labor over that trust. It exists naturally. It exists without coercion. And it permeates into other aspects of your relationship too. Once you feel emotionally safe with someone, you're more likely to trust them in all the other areas of your relationship and your life together. You trust them to pay their bills or do their job or show up for the kids or not cheat on you. While a lot of people claim that this is the dream, that they want this kind of partner that they can implicitly trust, who's looking out for them with compassion at all times, even if they're not there. A lot of people who get addicted to drama and the uneasiness of unstable relationships because of their baseline, they get turned off by that. They get bored. There is no challenge. You come home every day to the same person. They will always be there because you expect them to be there because they want to be there. So you have to consider if that's what you want. That inherent trust is why healthy relationships also lack that big element of fear that makes our unhealthy, our dysfunctional relationships so exciting, so exhilarating, right? So think about the healthiest relationship you ever had, or, think about the relationship you're in right now. Do you walk around your relationship in fear? Do you feel like you're walking on eggshells, which is very common if you've been in narcissistic relationships or a narcissistic family? Are you always like waiting for the other person to start a fight or to punish you for something that you said or did or something you didn't even realize you said or did? That's a toxic and dysfunctional relationship, and it takes up so much bandwidth in our lives. We're constantly looking over our shoulders going, oh my God, are they going to yell at me? Are they going to get mad? Have I done this right? In these bad relationships, there's this element of fear, and we get so conditioned to it, so conditioned to our brain just constantly going, what is that? Did I do this? Do I do that? That we don't even realize it's happening. Our brains, our nervous systems are just running on full steam all the time, overanalyzing everything. And when you get into a healthy relationship, that fear is gone. You don't have to. You're safe, right? You don't have to overanalyze everything. So all of a sudden, bang. This huge, almost other creature in your life that you had to feed constantly, this fear is gone. You don't have to chase that anymore, walk on eggshells, constantly check and analyze everything you did. And when you come from that kind of environment and you're suddenly removed from it, you can feel understimulated. Your nervous system literally becomes addicted and normalized to the sense of panic that you feel in a bad relationship or a bad home, and it craves it. And so you'll want to go back into that environment where you're constantly going, what's going on? Who's doing what is this? What is that? Falling into a healthy relationship, you lack fear, and that can feel boring. So it's not uncommon if you are not being very conscious and very intentional about working with your nervous system as you heal yourself and learn new relationship skills, then you can find yourself self-sabotaging subconsciously to create that kind of environment so that you feel like you're back at home. You'll end up creating drama to get yourself back into an unstable emotional environment, and it will destroy the good relationship that you and your partner have worked really hard. There are balanced dynamics as well in a healthy relationship, and that contributes to this kind of boredom that so many people complain about once they finally get that good partnership, okay? There is a tightrope dynamic to every toxic relationship. And that tightrope's not just any tightrope, my friend. It's razor wire. When you're in a bad relationship with a toxic person, or you are still in that toxic mode and bonding to someone else who's just as messed up as you are, then you end up with power struggles on either side, okay? One wrong move, it's you v your partner. The dynamics rarely balanced. One person usually ends up taking everything, and the other person gives until they're drained, resentful, miserable. And it's exhausting in every single sense of the word. Healthy relationships distinctly lack that, okay? There's no power struggle. Growing pains, yeah, fine. Everyone has growing pains. We're learning how to fit our lives together. You've got to find the balance. But in a healthy relationship, you do not have to constantly sacrifice yourself. You don't have to constantly doubt yourself. You don't have to give everything up, change everything that you are for the other person. Each one of you figures out your personal balance and then gives the other person space to fully and autonomously be themselves while still within a mutual shared space with you, okay? Within your relationship, that's how it should work. No one is trying to cross lines or to intentionally take more than they intend to give. Similar boredom, though, can set in if you're not used to that. You will feel that boredom if you're not fighting that struggle. If you've all of a sudden come from a background where you were constantly fighting against something, trying desperately to be seen, to be heard, to be valued, to be listened to, loved, whatever it was, and you all of a sudden step into a space where that just happens automatically, you don't have to fight with it. Again, you all of a sudden find yourself dealing with this huge basket of extra energy that you didn't know you had. For some, it can feel like a void because you're not fighting up this hill all the time. So if all you've ever known is fighting for your own space, being with someone who just gives it to you without asking can feel scary and it can feel boring. You don't have to grovel either in a healthy relationship. And this is probably one of the biggest ones and one of the most subtle ones that can really push a person into thinking that they have a boring relationship. They're not begging. Okay. I call it the grovel system, right? In bad relationships, you have this grovel system. you figure out that you need help with something, or that, you're going to need your partner to be there with you for something. And so like days ahead of time, you're thinking like, how am I going to ask? When am I going to ask? I have to do it just right, in just the right place, with just the right food in their belly. And I have to word it just the right way so that they'll say yes. And then I know they're going to say no the first couple of times. So I'll keep asking because I really need them. It's a whole routine. You have to beg and beg and beg for help or whatever it is. It feels like moving a mountain. It's a part of that whole dysfunctional relationship dance, and it's crap, and it wears you down. But in the healthy relationship, guess what? Nope. You don't have to beg, because the other person loves you as deeply as they love themselves. That's key. And they don't need you to beg. They want to help you. They want to be with you. They want to be involved. They want to show up for you when it matters, because they want you to know that there is someone behind you at all times. And again, if you're not fighting for that love, that support in a relationship, it's just there when you wake up, it can feel mighty boring when all you've ever known is conflict and groveling. So stop chasing dysfunction. Stop chasing dysfunction. If you want to be serious about being in a happy, healthy relationship, then you need to get out of fantasy mode and put yourself in reality. Okay? The perfect relationship is not going to be 4,000 miles a minute, exciting, exhilarating, perfect fairy tale romance all the time. Most of the time, it's going to be boring. Most of the time, it's going to be totally freaking boring. Yeah, sometimes boredom can be a bad sign, right? Because we should be able to still grow within our relationships, move and progress in, in a forward direction. But you got to be sure about what you're working with, okay? Because what real love is not a constant battle and struggle against another person, okay? True love is this always present, even in the most mundane moments, force in our life. It's just there. It's not forced. It's not coerced. It looks simply like someone who just wakes up every day and chooses to stick around, no matter what other crap is going on. Okay? You want that 50-year relationship? You want to just sink comfortably into the arms of someone who's sinking right back? Then you need to understand that that's just going to look like an average day most days. It's not going to be a fairy tale, and it's not going to be a fight. Embrace the peace and do a deep dive. Ask yourself some tough questions. See the bigger patterns in your partners, your relationships, and the connections that you choose to let go of. I hope you loved this episode. I hope you've learned something. I think for a lot of you, that's really gonna change some things around and change the way you're looking at your relationships and the ideal partnerships that you're striving toward. And that's always a great thing. If you loved what you heard today, why not think about leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts? If you do, and you take a screenshot and send it to me, I will send you a free ebook. It is really that simple. Dead simple. It's all you got to do is get in touch with me through the website or send your screenshot to me on Instagram. Just leave a few words about what you loved and how the show helped you, and that's it. Free ebook. You cannot beat that. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Again, I hope this has helped. I hope this has inspired you. And if not, well, we always have TikTok and next week. For everyone else, keep your heads up, keep your eyes on the stars, and keep moving forward. Until next week. Bye-bye.